Well, look at what we have here. We have, so today we're going to look at the geography of the ancient Near East. Now, uh, on this this module for this week, there's a video by John Walton explaining what is meant by the ancient Near East. We're looking at the geography of that ancient Near East, but sometimes you'll hear the term ancient Near East, and this is what it was called really before the Middle East. So the Middle East is kind of a modern day term, but previously it was called the ancient Near East. So we're talking about uh, virtually the same environment. And so we're going to discover the land of the Old Testament. This will just be a basic, very elementary understanding of the ancient Near East, not going to go into great depth of detail, just wanting to set a foundation with you, okay? Uh, and the topics we're going to discuss in this presentation are going to be the area of the ancient Near East called the Fertile Crescent. And I'll have pictures for you to show you what that area is. Also, the area within the Fertile Crescent called Mesopotamia. Maybe you've heard this term before. We're going to explain this term and the area in which this is. And Egypt, of course, many of you have heard of Egypt. It is, of course, still a modern day country. So it was also an ancient country and a very key player in the Bible. A term that you may not have heard before, the Levant. This is the area that is along the Mediterranean Sea and would be the area of probably southern Turkey down along uh, the Mediterranean into uh, the upper part of the Sinai Peninsula and into the northern part of Egypt. So we're going to look at these areas and their impact, as well as the international highways that were in that period of time, because there were trade routes, and those trade routes played a key role in the development of the ancient Near East. So, first of all, the Fertile Crescent. And what is the Fertile Crescent? Well, the phrase was coined by a man named James Breasted. He coined the phrase, and it describes a band of land where the conditions favor the establishment of early agricultural settlements. So often when we think about the Middle East, we think about uh, desert. We think about areas like Saudi Arabia, which are pretty well barren. But in this section of the Middle East, uh, we're not dealing with barren land, although there are some areas that would be considered desert regions. But this actually is a land where the soil is fertile. There are multiple rivers, and we'll discuss those rivers. But the Fertile Crescent is a fertile agricultural area. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the Fertile Crescent. And as you see from this picture, we're talking about an area roughly from the uh, Persian Gulf, moving through what would be considered modern day Iraq into the area of Syria, and then down the Mediterranean coasts in Lebanon and what would be considered today Israel and Palestine. And so that is the area that is known as the Fertile Crescent. Now, what is historically significant about the Fertile Crescent? Well, it's agriculturally vibrant. Again, you don't think about the Middle East and the ancient Near East being an area that is agriculturally vibrant, but this area actually is. Origins of life. It is thought, and your Old Testament text will tell you that this is the area in which life sprang forth from. So the Garden of Eden was in this area, the area of the Fertile Crescent, where four rivers came together, two of those rivers being the Tigris and Euphrates, and we'll talk about them shortly. And it's a connection of continents. You have the Asian continent and the African continent and the European to some extent. European really is over into Greece and that area. Not really Turkey. Turkey is still Asia, what will be known later as Asia Minor. All of these connecting areas coming together in this fertile spot. So when we talk about the Fertile Crescent, this is what we're talking about, okay? Next, you see Mesopotamia. So within the area of the Fertile Crescent is an area known as Mesopotamia or Mesopotamia. Sometimes it's easy to mispronounce this very word. But for our purposes, it is the land from which Abraham comes. And it's a land of which origins begin. Mesopotamia was an integral part of the biblical landscape in many periods. Genesis locates Abraham's home in Mesopotamia, and that is covered in Genesis 11 through 12. Also, you have kings from Assyria and Babylon that appear frequently in the historical and the prophetic books of the Old Testament. Jewish captives from Jerusalem spent many years in exile near Babylon. And on this side right here, I have a picture of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. This is kind of a computer rendering of what they may have looked like. Of course, this is one of the wonders of the ancient world. So this area, the majority of the area would be in what is modern day Iraq, northern Syria, and the extreme southeastern Turkey area of modern day. But this was ancient Mesopotamia. And so really what I want you to know about Mesopotamia is the geographical location, dealing with the Tigris and Euphrates, and I'll talk briefly about the Tigris and Euphrates here shortly. This is kind of the origins of civilization. I took a class years ago at Jacksonville State, and it was on the origins of civilization, in which the instructor spoke about how life sprang up at different points around the world. But for a biblical understanding of where the origins of life began, Mesopotamia is central to that discussion. And as you see, over a period of time, art develops, civilizations develop, and civilizations produce art. And so you can find some ancient art in the area of Mesopotamia dating thousands of years ago. And what is particularly significant about Mesopotamia also is these two major rivers that really help that area to be extremely fertile. You know, in America, as we all are very familiar with, we have the Great River, and that Great River is the Mississippi River. And around the Mississippi River, it is extremely fertile. That's where all the countries, the majority of the country's fields and agricultural industry is prevalent there, and a lot of our food is produced there. Well, it's the same way in this area of Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, and between these two rivers, these two major rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. So they dominate Mesopotamia. Both rivers originate in the high mountains above to the north, where the Tigris river actually begins. You have the Zoar Mountains. And so they begin up in the mountains and they come down and they flow out to the Persian Gulf. And maybe you've heard of the Persian Gulf in the context of modern day Iraq. This is the area of Iraq that we're talking about right now. And so you can see that these rivers extend for long periods of geographical distance. The Euphrates going 1,780 miles, the Tigris going 1,150 miles, and the differences between the two, but they're very significant. Any place on the map, any place in the world, in ancient times, the main thing that helped to establish a civilization was a river. If you look at where these cities sprang up, I mean, even go back to this slide right here, you have Nineveh, which at one point was a capital city in the Assyrian Empire. Where is Nineveh? It's right along the Tigris River. Babylon will be in between the Tigris and the Euphrates. So these rivers played a major role, not only in the area of Mesopotamia, but rivers play a major role in all ancient civilizations. So what's the historical significance of Mesopotamia? It is the land of Abraham. And Abraham is from Ur. So this is the land of Abraham. The geographical diversity from north to south. I mean, you have two mountain ranges coming together in the north. You have southern area along the coast. Think of it a lot like even the state we live in, Alabama. So I'm speaking to you from Gadsden, teaching at Gadsden State. Well, in the mountains of North Alabama, and this is where a lot of the rivers start and flow down to the sea. It's a longer geographical distance in Mesopotamia, but it's very similar. And then some major cities within Mesopotamia, Nineveh and Babylon. Those are two big cities that you'll be presented in the coming weeks. So we have Egypt, the land of the pharaohs, and looking at the geography of the ancient Near East, you also need to deal with Egypt. Egypt is going to play a significant role in the Bible. There will be people going in and out of Egypt. Particularly, it is the land of bondage for the Israelites. They go into bondage. That's the first time they go into bondage. They'll go into bondage multiple times. When you read throughout the Old Testament, you'll see the Babylonian captivity, the Assyrian Empire at one time, of course, has a huge impact on Israel as well. But Egypt is a major player in the ancient Near East. It is the home of one of the world's enduring civilizations. Egypt looms large on the biblical landscape For over 3,000 years, Egyptian history unfolded, casting its spell over the ancient world. Of course, you have Abraham that spent time in Egypt. Remember, he goes down to Egypt with Sarah, and he uh, tells everyone that Sarah is not his wife, his sister, because he's wanting to preserve his life, and all that comes out of that. Of course, later on, you'll have Joseph sold into slavery. He goes down to Egypt, becomes essentially the prime minister of Egypt. Then you have Jacob, Joseph's father, and his sons that sold Joseph into slavery. Everybody moves to Egypt, and so Egypt plays a big role there. Even later on, of course, it's not Old Testament but New Testament. New Testament, Jesus himself goes down to Egypt as a child, as a little baby, and comes back. Um, so, what is another bit of significance about it? It also has a river, and that is the Nile River. The Nile is one of the greatest rivers in the world. I think you could put the Nile, the Amazon, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Ganges, the Danube, the Rhine. You can have all these listed because there are uh, very significant rivers, but the Nile, of course, is the one running uh, through Egypt. Now, the Nile does something pretty spectacular. We think about rivers in our nation, and all those rivers flow. Uh, they flow south, but the Nile uh, actually runs north because it's running geographically from a higher area down in Ethiopia, or the area of Kush, to the sea. So it's flowing south to north, not north to south. We think about rivers here flowing um, north to south, but the Nile is doing the opposite. But it's one of those very natural wonders and had a huge impact. Again, these civilizations are built on these rivers, so they are significant in the development of these areas. So, what's the historical significance of Egypt? Well, it's the land of bondage. It's the place in which the Israelite people are first in bondage. Of course, you think about Egypt, it's hard not to think about Moses. Moses being born and raised in Egypt, spending 40 years in the house of Pharaoh, then spending another 40 years um, in the desert, and then spending another 40 years in the desert after uh, the people of Israel are let go from the bondage, and Moses goes with the people of Israel through the wilderness wanderings. So, Moses, when you think about Egypt, you usually think of Moses more than anybody else. And then, of course, the pharaohs, the leaders, the gods, so to speak, little g, of Egypt, they were the ones in control there. The next, you have the Levant. The term Levant describes the habitable land along the eastern Mediterranean coast, sandwiched between the Mediterranean Sea on the west and the Syro-Arabian Desert to the east. So you have Syria and Lebanon that comprise the northern part. You have Palestine, and it goes down into, you'll see from this map, uh, from Turkey in the north to Egypt in the south. This is the Levant. It's part of that Fertile Crescent area, and so agriculturally, it's a wonderful place, and it's why these civilizations sprung up where they sprung up because there was water. And civilizations need water to survive. People need to drink, and people need to live. So where there is water, there is life. And we're thankful for that. Historical significance of Levant is the land of the Bible. When you think about the biblical area, this is where you think. This is the land of the Bible. And it's an intersecting of nations. Again, you have Turkey to the north, which Asia Minor later in New Testament time. And then you have Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Israel, down into the Sinai Peninsula, down into Egypt. And so right here in this area is going to be an intersection of nations. And still to this day, that is the case. Some major cities, Damascus, of course, is Syria, Jericho, which you will deal with in the book of Joshua, and of course, Jerusalem, the city of that great king. And so all of these are in the Levant. International highways. So you have trade routes. Of course, it's not highways as we think of them. They're not paved roads, but they're dirt roads, very impactful. And along these roads, they are trading. And so trade becomes a way to connect the world. And there are multiple highways throughout the Bible that connect the biblical area. And you'll see and hear about people walking on these roads. Like in the New Testament, where they speak about the Good Samaritan. He went from Jerusalem to Jericho, went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves. He was walking along a road, going down in elevation because Jericho is next to the Dead Sea, down along where the Jordan goes out into the Dead Sea. Jerusalem is higher in elevation, so he's actually going downhill when he makes that journey. So roads played a significant portion, played a significant piece of ancient Near East history. So you had the rivers and the roads, and along these ways you see. And so you deal with two major international highways connecting Egypt and Mesopotamia. That is the way to the sea. This is right here, the way to the sea and the way of Shur. And so you have those together. Also, probably the most significant, the one that actually goes over into Asia and will go over through Mesopotamia, and that area is the King's Highway. And you see a reference to the King's Highway in Numbers 21-22. So these are the highways that go through the Levant, the area there of biblical times, and the area that we'll be dealing with most frequently in the land of Israel. This is where these intersect, and it's the King's Highway, the way of Shur, and the way to the sea. Of course, these are significant because there are trade routes. They are trade routes, and so goods are going from one place to another through this. And also, there are travel possibilities. So people can travel along these roads, not just to trade, but also to go from one nation to the next. A few more maps I just wanted to show you as far as dealing with the geography of the ancient Near East, particularly Israel. And this is the 12 tribes and where they would ultimately settle when the land is divided up. This is time of Judges, Joshua. Joshua is when it's settled, and of course that they are where they are in the book of Judges. But this is just gives you an idea of where these tribes are going to set up. Of course, you have Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh on the other side of the Jordan River. And then you have Asher, Nephtali, Zebulun, Issachar, Ephraim, Dan, Philistia, Benjamin, Judah, and Simeon, and Edom to the south, Moab over there. Those aren't actual tribes, but that's actual areas, Philistia being one of those areas as well. Usually, a lot more is given to Judah. Of course, that's the tribe from which Messiah will come. And Dan. So you'll hear that Samson is from the tribe of Dan. Also Benjamin. And at the end of the book of Judges, I saw a map recently, and it had multiple colors in that area of Benjamin because from the other tribes, the men of Benjamin received wives, and you can read about what happened at the end of the book of Judges on your own time. And then this is just a map of the divided kingdom. Of course, the kingdom will be divided. This is 1 Kings 12. The kingdom's divided, and that is Judah to the south, Israel to the north. Of course, ultimately, Israel will fall. Judah will fall, but Israel will never be reestablished as far as the tribe or that divided kingdom is concerned. And so we'll speak about those things when we get to them in the prophets. That's where we'll get into the prophets. So I want to thank you for watching this presentation. And if you need me, contact me. The easiest way to contact me is through my email. And you have a wonderful day.